This is a showcase of ZOS open tools, and I'll be going through a few of the tools in the context of my general workflow as a ZOS open contributor. So let's get into it. The first thing is that I have some news. So 1Password Teams is now available for all ZOS open contributors. That means we are able to use things like the vault and secrets, etc. All of the features essentially that's available in in 1Password, and you can sign up here and after I send an invite. So currently, Mike Fulton and myself are the owners for this org. This is made available to us through an initiative from 1Password, where they give back to open source contributors or open source community. And since this whole project is open source, we are able to use their tooling for our work. So we can use this in multiple ways. So 1Password have been adding a lot of capability on the security and vault front. So we'll be able to store our individual zeros, open related individual SSH keys or whatever passwords, etc. And also access keys that can be used in access keys or tokens that can be used in a CLI context. And also, they've recently rolled out something called 1Password service accounts, which can again be used with CI/CD or with GitHub Actions, for example. So it will prove to be very useful in the coming months of work. And also, it's a thing with which you can entice new contributors, so they can show up and get a taste of what 1Password is like. So, yeah, if you're interested, you can ping me or contact Igor or Mike or Harita, and they'll be able to arrange for um, signing yourself up with this offer. Or, yeah, okay. So just a reminder there. So it would be best if you could sign up with your personal ID rather than a work ID, because this is supposed to be used for COS open related work and for open source specific to this project really. So that's the news. Let me start with logging in. I'll show you sort of live demo of how I've used 1Password and the SSH auth capability and a few of the other capabilities that are available now. Just get into it. So I don't have a biometric authenticator thing, so it just shows a normal prompt to authorize. I'll show the config snips that are required to get this working in a bit. I have things that are done in the logon script, so it takes a few seconds. Back to the slides. So you can use 1Password with SSH and commit signing for Git. So put a bunch of links which will be shared later in the slides. So what 1Password does is it runs its own SSH agent, and that way it's able to pull in secrets from its vault. And what we need to do is just point our SSH config on your workstation to use the 1Password's agent for authentication. And as you see, this can also work for authentication or signing on the server, which happens through a SSH config keyword called forward agent, I think. So it essentially allows you to ship back the verification from the server to the workstation, and then 1Password SSH agent will handle it. Let's do a quick SSH to GitHub from 0s. And this should again use the 1Password SSH agent on the workstation. So this is just a test authentication to say that you don't need any SSH setup on your server, because I don't have any public or private keys here, just forwards it from the workstation's vault, workstation's one passwords vault. So that works. We'll come back to commit signing in a little bit, and the rest of the slide in a bit. So I have to do a quick detour to a product called powerline-go, because you've seen this now. So powerline-go is implementation of the famous prompt, bash prompt called powerline in Go. So the bash version of powerline is quite slow, at least on this emulated 0s. So I was looking for alternatives and found this, and it's very handy. So the first thing to note from the right side is I'm using the standard macOS terminal and need to set the text encoding to UTF-8. This will not work with man pages. So that's kind of a trade-off that you have to decide if you want to use man pages, with fancy text, etc. So that will need text encoding of 8859-1 ASCII. Whereas if you want this sort of prompt, you'd have to use UTF-8. So the other thing is there is no installable binary available in this um, repository right now. So you need to clone it and build. There is one patch that it will apply to improve on whatever is available there. The rest has been already upstreamed. It's merged into the powerline, and they have a release with native zero support already in there. On the left is shows symbols. These are related to Git. So if you go into any directory, Git initialized directory, these are the things that it will show. Uh, I'll talk through them as we go through Git, an example of Git commit signing in a little while. We'll talk through it with a few screenshot examples from the following slides, and then we'll see it work live when we do the Git commit signing again later. So, um, so there are segments that you can use in Powerline Go. It has different modules for different segments. So, the first part is the directory segment, which is this thing. So it shows a bunch of top level directories, and if you're in a very nested directory, it shows the top three or something which is configurable, and then it'll show a bunch of dots. This shows the Git branch if you're in a Git initialized directory, and these counts are what you see from the previous slide over here. So if there's a plus, it means there are files that are not known to this particular Git directory. The pencil mark says that Git tracked files have been modified, and that count increases as I've gone in and updated the files. And ignore the weirdness of this thing, because I was resizing the terminal and trying to take screenshots, so that got a little weird. So as I update the files, you'll see that the uh, modified files, or whatever this thing is, files modified or not staged for commit, the count keeps increasing. And at one point, I do a git add of each of these files to say, start tracking these files, tracking the changes to these files. See the count here starts decreasing and count here is increasing. Tick means that it's staged for commit. And later, not sure if it's in the next slide, but we'll see. Yep. So from here, shows the staged um, number of files. And then as I do commits, it'll the upward pointing arrow is to say that your branch or repo is 1, 2, 3, or 4 or 5 commits ahead of the remote master. So as I do commits, the staged things keep reducing and the actual commits increase. So it's ahead of master by 5 commits. And the other thing you'll notice is that as long as all work is Git accounted for, this particular segment changes from red to green. Just again to say if your directory is clean, and yeah. Um, it's all in this slide. Back to one password. So the config required on the local workstation is, so you'd remember that I did SSH space zopen at the start from my workstation to get to this machine. So zopen is just a reference to this particular host configuration, my local sh config file. And what it does is just gives a username, host name, and forward agent. That's the one through which SSH on the server is able to use my local identity agent. And this string is specific to Mac OS. So on Linux or Windows, the one password SSH docs will point to a different thing that you'll have to use. So that's that. And the other thing is, if you can also use the one password's SSH agent by setting this environment variable on your workstation, and this will allow you to use other tools which use SSH. So, as an example of that, uh, open a local terminal, and there is this tool called rclone, which is like a superset of rsync, except that it adds the capabilities to sync and do whatever else with cloud targets and all of that. So, and I have a target defined in my rclone uh, with the name of zeropen. So if I do rclone ls colon zeropen ls space zeropen colon, referring to the target name and then the directory, it will authenticate using this authsock variable and one password, and it'll list the contents. That's a related thing. There we go. Cancel out of that. So anyway, so one password is usable there too. So it's not just specific to SH, but tools that can use uh, work with this particular variable and not just SH binary directly. So that's that for now. That's on the workstation config. So just give a quick look at the config that's required for powerline-go after the build. Once you do the git clone and zeropen build, it'll uh, produce the executable. And in your bash RC on the server or even on your local workstation, if you want, you can define this, and just the first part, the second part will come to later. So this is parameter specific to Git, the Git module. So what I'm doing here is saying, don't show me a thing for stashed work. In my case, on an emulated 0s, it reduces the loading time. And here you can introduce whatever modules you want to use, and there are a lot of them. Yeah. So there are modules for different cloud environments and Ruby, Python, Perl, whatever language related thing, and Terraform workspace and Python virtual environments, and Windows subsystem for Linux. You can also add the username, host, and root detection. So if you're done SU and are a root user, I think it'll show a lock icon here. So I've removed all of that extras for now and just use the basics that's usable with this particular 0s instance. Yeah, so I'll also show on my local terminal. So as an example of the necessity for such a thing. So let's say I'm over here, a home directory, going to some directory and it's going somewhere, and it shows only the present working directory over there. And I found myself uh, like getting lost mentally, like where I am in general. So I thought it would be useful to generally have whole paths there. So it's easier to see what's going on. The other thing is, if you print a lot of output on the terminal, it's really hard to see where your output is and where it is that you exactly issued the command. So as a first step, what I did was just introduce this particular incantation, source that. Yeah. So at least this shows the full path and also in color, so it's easier to identify, where the output, where the command was issued, and how long the output is, etc. So the next step there is, let's introduce powerline-go. As you saw on the slide, it's this function. And yeah, I just commented it for now. That comment. We'll source the thing again. So that's on my local terminal as well. So use it on wherever Go works really. Okay. So go back to the 1Password content. So we'll have a look at commit signing in a little bit. And on the workstation, there's also something called 1Password CLI. You can read up on this, this available links. But essentially, I think it's written in Go, and you can use it to uh, save AWS secret keys or whatever keys and tokens, etc., in your 1Password vault. And the CLI will be able to interrogate 1Password on your workstation and retrieve whatever information, so you don't have to save any secrets on your workstation or server, wherever. So that's the advantage, is that it's able to communicate with 1Password to retrieve secrets. And it has a whole bunch of plugins. So different providers, SaaS providers, or whoever can write plugins for this CLI, and they are called shell extensions, shell plugins. And I'm assuming 1Password CLI is written in Go because the shell plugins are written in Go. So that's where this opportunity comes in, where possibly we can work with 1Password to add support for ZeroS, ZeroS and Linux on Z. So this will unlock a whole new set of opportunities. This is just an example of the kind of things that are available through 1Password CLI. So essentially means none of these tokens or secrets need to be saved on local workstation or on the server. You can just retrieve stuff from your 1Password vault. So 1Password service account is a recently released, a thing that came out of beta recently. So you can use it in the context of GitHub Actions or Jenkins. I think there's also a video in this link where walk through setting up GitHub Actions in order to pull a secret from 1Password vault and then use that to do something. So there's also a 1Password related plugin that makes CLI work with Jenkins. So if the CLI were to be ported to ZeroS, you can do a lot more secure and fancy things. And finally, so this Git commit signing with SSH was a feature that came in Git 2.39 something, and key signing files have been a feature that's available in SSH for a while. So I think this Git commit signing with SSH came in like 1 or 2 years ago or something. So it's an option in addition to the GPG commit signing. So those who want to use GPG can use it for everything, and also Git commit signing. Whereas if you want simplicity with just SSH keys, you can use SSH's Git commit signing. And this blog explains how to use 1Password CLI again, where I think it pulls in the GPG key from 1Password vault and then use that to sign commits with GPG. So because it relies on CLI, I don't think you'll be able to use it for commit signing with GPG with one password involved on 0s. So if your commit related workflows are mostly on a workstation, this should work well. And if you want to use GPG, so that's that on one password. So just if you're interested in using one password or are gently curious, you reach out to uh, Mike or Harita or Igor to try to sign up for this thing. And again, a reminder: this is only for only for 0s Open related work. So do keep that in mind. Okay. So coming back to git commit, yeah, let's try to do a git commit with a signing in my display here. Oops. Okay. So this depends on the OpenSSH 9.3 build that was released. Port of OpenSSH 9.3 was released. So just gonna source it because we need the new SSH keygen binary from there. So is the script in my bash RC that goes there and sources it and comes back. So it's handy. Now we have this empty directory and we'll do a git init. Should be git initialized and see the branch here. Okay. File. See the +1 to say untracked files. Git add dot to add it. The plus will become a tick. And it's staged. Do a git commit S for sign message. It show the prompt. So that's the GitHub signing SH key from my one password vault, which is also on my GitHub account for the signing key. So all that's signed. I'll also git log to show that particular commit signature. I think these two lines are something related, something to do with the newer OpenSSH, and maybe because it's sitting on top of the OpenSSH, it's available in the OS by default. So anyway, we have a good git signature with whatever message. In order to get this good git signature thing, we need to add the accepted signers, and that's here. So this is an example of what I have on my local workstation. So it's a name, signing key, and then if you're using Mac, so you don't want this thing to get added everywhere. So excludes file to point it to a git ignore, and then that file has this thing. Then for the GPG, to make GPG use SSH signing, we'll point this to GPG format SSH, and then SSH thing points to the one password SSH sign. Note that this parameter is only relevant for your workstation. On the next slide, I have the config to use on host or server, which doesn't have this. The allowed sign, format over there, GPG sign is there. And then you have the allowed signers file, which is what is necessary in order to show this thing in green. So it's okay. So it just shows your email and public key, and yeah, the signing key, email followed by signing key is what's in here. And because we have the forward agent and identity agent configured on the SH config on your workstation, we'll get the prompt from one password as we saw in the example. So that's that. I think that's it here. Scrolling through. Yeah, that's it. Next up is direnv. Direnv is a tool written in Go that's used for dynamically doing things specific to your directory. So that's the last line over here. So that's how you activate direnv. And additionally, as you see here, there is a segment for powerline-go which shows info provided by direnv. um, so what? Just open these links here to start off. So what it allows you to do is load environment variables or do certain actions whenever you step into a directory, and as you exit that directory, it undoes it. So it's useful in the context of a developer who's working with multiple programming languages or tools, and also in the case where someone has to work with multiple different versions of tools. So in few directories there are Node.js 18 something, and in another directory is working with Node.js 20. So if you want to set environment variables that are specific to that particular directory or project, this is the tool that will allow you to do that. And it'll show an example of how it works for Python, for example. And there's also integration for one password for direnv. So one password CLI is not available on CentOS yet. So at least on your workstation, you should be able to use direnv along with the CLIs, which allow you to load secrets from one password and make it available such that it's only available to that particular project or directory. And additionally, what it does is so the base premise of this is you have a .nrc file in whichever directory where you want to do automated actions in, and then there are functions called standard library of bash functions that's comes standard with this tool. It's available for invoking within each nrc. So in addition to the standard library, we are able to write our own bash functions and put it in a .config/direnv directory, and then that function can be used in the context of nrc wherever you use that nrc in the various directories. So this is a way to centralize the function definitions, and then just invoke things or set variables and add path. Add a binary directory to a path with that here. So I'll show an example of that. Additionally, like I'll go into the example of Python. So in Python, there are things called package managers and environment managers. So npm is the Node.js package manager, and pip is another general package manager with which you can install Python packages and stuff. The same for Conda, which is just a short for Anaconda or Mini Conda, which are variants. So the difference between these two is that package managers allow you to install software, manage versions and dependencies of all of those things, whereas environment managers are things that create an isolated environment of whatever packages and whatever things you want to keep there. So you'll see that Conda is in both because it's an environment manager with which you can create environments, and you can also install things with it, like Conda install whatever package. And Python has been coming with a built-in uh, virtual environment manager called venv, and there is also one called virtual env, and Conda itself has Conda. There are a lot more. So if you're working on multiple projects with different programming languages, direnv is useful to make it super easy to activate project specific things and you leave the place clean when you leave that directory, and be sure you don't leave any config from one particular session or whatever lying around. Again, there is no release for it, so that you can do zopen install for. So the zopen meta will need some sort of additions, I think, to make it easy to install Go binaries, because by default they don't need a libdir or bindir or man pages. So they can all of the binaries can just go to home/go/bin. So yeah, so once the plumbing for that is in place in the meta repo, and then I think look to publish these things as binary installable. Until then, git clone and build should do. Going to the links. Um, so this is an example of what to expect in terms of configuring the env. This is where you save functions that you want to add in addition to the standard library, and whatever functions you define in this place, they are callable in your envarc in whichever directory. Same thing for this one, which is for personal extensions and third-party extensions. So this is something that some other person might provide, and you can use them. Whereas this is your own uh, requirements over there. This is a config file where you can toml spec config, and allow is a mechanism in which you can control the execution of nvarc or .n files, and that's important because considering that it's automatically loading things or activating things, this is useful to sort of security mechanism that you can set up in direnv.toml to say automatically run nvarc files, source nvarc files only from these places or these exact files. They'll be documented somewhere over here. That's that. So this is how you add it to your session. And then this is a manual page for standard library where there are loads of functions that you can call in RC file or nvarc. So one of the main things is there's a thing for path underscore add. It will look like this. If you just add this line into a nvarc file, it'll what's this prepend to the existing path. So it'll add to the front, and that'll exist only as long as you're inside that particular directory. If you exit, it'll remove it. So that's useful for generally adding things. Path add, path rm, and there are a lot of functions that you can use here. Really useful. And then layout is the word that they use to say, this is how a Go project would look, or a Node, PHP, Perl, whatever. And I'll show the Python example. So this is able to activate a pre-existing virtual environment, or if one doesn't exist, it will create one for a particular Python version that's available. So that's a little bit about the standard lib and what's available there. But it's worth analyzing it in the context of our ZeroOpen work and seeing how much of it can be useful for simplifying ZeroOpen maintenance itself. In addition to, of course, its usefulness as a environment loading or automatic loading, changing sort of thing. So this is the direnv's wiki page where it shows how to set up for languages or other integrations. This is where one password integration comes in, so you can make it do one password related things as you enter and exit the directory, Terraform, Homebrew, etc. So we'll go to the example. I'll show the config. I'll just show my bash RC, and the two important parts here are this, add the eval of this thing, and In the powerline-go, I have the module called direnv, also venv. Venv is one of the Python's virtual environments thing. So it's not strictly for this, but for virtual environments in general. So it would cover both of these, and see how that looks in Powerline. So that's that. I think I have set up. So if I go to zeropen/dev, it should automatically um, load the nvarc file that's there, and it will show a segment for in Powerline in the prompt if it's activated. It's not activated currently, so I'll need to sh back in again or exec bash l. See if that works. Take a minute or two. You need to restart the bash shell after you add this eval of direnv to your bash rc. So it's not a thing that you need to do every time. So it's just after the first installation this is necessary. Go to there and think it should activate. Yep. So there's this nvarc file there. It doesn't really have anything, just the export statement, and that's what you see here saying it has exported that. And then also the segment that shows the name of this directory. So currently you see it's a duplication. Asked the repo owner to see if they can just color the segment instead if there is dir env rather than have duplication. See how that goes. But anyway, so once I'm in the dev directory, there is an nvarc. It has automatically loaded. So now I'll do I have a couple of Python directories. So I think no. Yeah. Okay, so I'll just go to PyTest, and it's not an actual Python directory. It's just has something in there. So it loads uh, another variable called inner specific to that environment, and so the reason for having that inner outer thing is let's see if I have another directory in there. Yep, PyTest nested. There's another nested directory. So this is just to show the segment changes, and also that this variable is only available while you're in that directory. So I have a script on the dev folder which prints all three of those at the same time. So at first it should print the outer if it's available in the inner one, and the last one is inner two. Inner two is currently active, so it says yes. Go out, I should unload it and just show the one in the middle. It's not actually this slow, it's just this emulated zeros that is slow. On a real mainframe or any real computer without emulation, this will be instantaneous, so no need to worry about that. So I'll go into Py projects directory now. That's where I have a couple of that's a Python project directory. So there's another segment that's coming now. That's the one for virtual environments. So it says that we are in this virtual environment now. So all that is just I'll show what's in the nvarc file now and continue from there. So this variable is used to say look for layouts in that particular directory. So I have this directory where I have virtual environments created, and this py projects directory is just for source code. So this is a useful thing to do because you can have your source separate from the binary and libraries and all of that. They'll all be in snakes. So the direnv one timeout is set to 30 seconds because it's kind of slow on this prompt. So I have to set a time, delay the timeout so that it doesn't show a warning that it's hung or something. So then when you set the virtual and underscore n variable to a particular directory where you have a virtual environment, it will look for this layout Python, and then there's a bash script, in the standard library, which is something for do something for Python. And if that variable is set, it goes there and activates that virtual environment. So normally what anyone would do to activate a virtual environment is, let's say we go to snakes/e. There is a directory called bin within that, and then there is an activate. So what anyone would usually do when they come in is source bin/activate. So that's the part that is, I'll do it manually now to show that it works the same. And that's the segment indicates that it's active now. So then deactivate it, it will go away. I'll go back to there. Now it should activate again because of the automatic directory loading thing. That's direnv and an example with virtual and Python virtual environments. And also we saw that how the variable is only available for that particular export is only available for that particular directory. This test. So that's direnv. It's pretty useful, not just for Python, but whatever other languages and layouts that it supports. We documented here. And I think this can also be used in a CI context where you can, if you cd to a directory, it will do a bunch of things, and it's useful in that context as well. That's showcase of direnv over there. It's essentially the same thing, just a screenshot for those who are just following the slides. Next one is another tool called bump. It's something that can be used to update versions. It's an alternative or a kind of a superset of something called dependabot. GitHub has dependabot is if you turn it on for a repository, it will go looking for newer versions of whatever language or library that you're using, and it can automatically create a pull request or commit or whatever, all of the things. But in our case, because we have, for example, let's say we have versions encoded in the download links, and also in sometimes somewhere here where you want to do cd to a directory or create symlinks and all of that. So there is a version is hard coded here. So this tool will allow us to automatically easily manage that. So there is an example of that with the git port. Pull request open for it. So this is all that's required. So there's one line addition to whichever build env file or whichever files where you have versions you want to automatically manage. So the syntax of this is you need this thing. It's a comment, and then this is just the keyword for our identification, and then this is the regex in order to catch the thing that you want to change. In our case, 2.40, and then following that is something called a pipeline, that bump pipeline. So it can parse the output for git releases or git tags or git refs, and the pipe asterisk means it'll pick out a semantic version from that. Of course, there are other non-git places to take versions from. So it can be just a normal URL, and you can use a regex to say pick that particular text from that area in order to find the latest of your version is available there. So we use just a verbose flag and bump check. With this setting, if you do a bump check build, and it say that 41 is the current version and it's also the latest in the file. So in this PR, what I've done is just manually turned it back to 2.40 and then run a bump check. So it'll show currently you have 240 and 241 is the latest. So that's a bump check. If you do a bump diff, it'll show what change it will make. So here you see that it will remove the 240 and add the 241.0. That's bump check and bump diff. That's primarily it. So explanation here of what I'm looking to with it. So let's say on your local workstation or on a Jenkins CI machine, you have the master directory of zeropen, and in there you have a whole all of the ports get cloned down, and then there are these 4 scripts that are available now, and they do as documented here. So pull is used to git clone or update the repositories, and it only looks for star port repositories to, and then avoids things like meta and whatever. Then SHR was handy at the point where, because we're doing git clone with HTTPS URLs, it would expect that when you do a push, it will try to push with HTTPS, which means it'll ask for the GitHub OAuth token. So instead of setting up that token, if you change it to SSH, if you have SSH already set up to Git from your workstation or ZeroS, the script just changes the remote origin URL from HTTPS to SSH for all of the ports that were downloaded to this directory. So it's maybe a one-time use or even a generally useful thing. Zbump is one that runs the bump check, bump diff, bump update commands that we saw earlier. And then zpush will it's a script that checks if the build env file was updated, and then commit that particular change with whatever message and create a patch. And in this link, I have a whole bunch of patches here for essentially adding that particular control line for bump to use and manage. So that's that's currently where we're at with bump. So it's still to be worked out on how to add this into CI so that it can automatically manage, because as we saw in the Git example, we are updating the build DNV file with this particular line. So that means when I run it in, say, might have it open. So I have to run this from the Z open directory, and I run it with a bump check /v and stuff. It means it'll look at only build DNV files. Same for this, and bump update, and I think this should be sufficient, but we'll see how it goes. So this means updating all of the build DNV files in 100 plus repos. So in order to automate this thing, this might mean setting up GitHub Actions or whatever automation like this specific to each repo. And that's where this idea of cloning it all to this directory and then creating patches, at least commits, comes handy. Because if we do the whole process in a CI machine, and if that service account on the CI machine has access to push without creating pull requests, create these commits and then just push it up to whichever repository. Of course, you can do the manual verification at some point and the manual verification here some point to see that the diff is doing what we want it to do. That's that. Um, yeah, that's bump for now. So this is an example of not using of it, not just working with Git repositories. So here we are making it look at this particular page, and these versions are neatly aligned for us in an order. That's helpful. So you can say use this regex in order to look for sudo hyphen whatever .tar .gz, and that uh, version, letter p if present, and then a following digit if present. So that's captured and represented in this $1. And because it's not semantic versioning this time, so it will pick up on 1914 and on 1913 p3 if this was the latest. So that's yeah. So it makes it very easy to keep up to date with versions, and then of course after you know we do a Z push and this thing, the latest code is pushed. If it's pushed through a particular account, then can also trigger an associated build for it, so that the latest release is also made. And because the version itself is now available in a variable in the build DNV files, that information can be also added to the release description over here. So I think currently this 9.3 comes from Echo 9.3, so that can be dynamically updated. So that's also useful there to see which version of a thing that we are using. So that's on bump. So next is a project called gotestsum. So normally when you're doing a test on a project, you do go test v for verbose if you want, and then those dots if you want to run all of the tests in a particular project. So this becomes quite detailed, and adding the verbose makes it even more detailed and hard to follow sometimes. So this is useful to produce the output in a human-friendly manner, or also consumable for scripting. And it's used in a bunch of famous projects. I think somewhere over here it was listed. There's a list of who uses it. Yep. So this was also another easy thing to port and will be useful in the coming months with in the future in general, with Go being available and all of that. This is a screenshot of how it looks. So this is a repo clone of bump. And instead of running go space test, those dots thing, you can just put this, and based on the particular directory where it finds the test files, it summarizes by directory. So this thingy means there are no tests over there, and tick is pass, and this is fail. Here it shows what particular fail there is, and this is just the human-friendly version of the output. They can also create JSON output or whatever else was documented there, so that can be used for further pipelining or automation. There's also times here. It's pretty useful. Shows how long a test runs. It's on bump. Sorry, on gotestsum. That's all I have for now. So this is all thanks to the presence of Clang, Go, Bash. So all of this is possible only because the initial work that has gone into zeropen until now. So these tools are uh, available now because of that previous work. So I'm really thankful for that available. And as you have seen here, this unlocks a whole new way of thinking even for developing for ZeroS. And who would expect to see this kind of thing in ZeroS, right? So yeah, that's all I have for now.